So, returning to our conversation, we often find ourselves exploring these bridges between ancient ways of thinking and the global now. And today, we're looking at where tradition and modernity meet in, I think, one of the most unexpected places.
Definitely unexpected. Worlds that are designed purely for games.
Exactly, for games. But they've somehow become, through, I guess, sheer human will,
Yeah.
sites of sacred memory.
Well, and that juxtaposition is what's so fascinating here, isn't it? We're seeing these powerful, spontaneous human rituals emerge in spaces that were explicitly designed to be the opposite.
The opposite.
Yeah, they're designed to be transient, utilitarian, focused entirely on the future.
On progress.
On progress, the next level, the next objective.
And yet here we are. They become these places where we stop, where we look backward, and where we hold memory. Our mission today is to really take a deep dive into the source material around this, around digital grief, remembrance, and to try and understand what happens when a player's silence in one of these spaces becomes permanent.
It's such an urgent conversation to have. I mean, for so many people, especially younger generations, a huge part of their community, their social structure, it lives in these digital worlds. And the sources we're looking at, they detail this transition so beautifully. They show us how we navigate loss in a world that, has no physical grave sites, no formal systems for acknowledgement.
Exactly. And games, they're usually defined by their rhythm. Right. There's this cycle.
You log in, you play.
You interact, you log out. There's this constant flow of engagement and, temporary disengagement.
Yeah.
But that rhythm, it gets broken.
Violently broken.
By this realization that someone doesn't log in anymore.
And that interruption, that's really the emotional core of this whole thing. I mean, at first, an absence it's normal.
Sure, people get busy.
People go on vacation, they take a break from the game. But then, as the text we're looking at describes it, the silence becomes something different. Longer, heavier. It's this psychological shift from, expectation, this implicit promise that they'll be back, to this definitive, really painful recognition of loss.
And this is where I think the real sort of philosophical weight of the sources comes in. How does the truth actually arrive?
Right.
If you lose touch with a friend in the physical world, you might get a call, a letter, but online. There's no system notification that says a member has left permanently.
No. There's no digital death certificate posted on the guild wall.
So how does the community find out?
Well, the material makes it really clear. The knowledge arrives through absence itself.
Through absence itself.
It's an existential realization. The community feels the weight of that absence, and then they have to connect the dots, usually outside the game.
On social media, maybe, or an email chain.
Exactly. The technical infrastructure it fails to convey the human truth. So the players, they have to supply that context themselves.
That choice. That spontaneous decision to acknowledge the human loss behind the avatar. That feels incredibly powerful. But let me just push back on that for a second.
Okay.
Because absence is also kind of the default state of the internet, right? You only really notice the person who was there. If I stop logging into a forum, is my absence even noted? Or am I just noise?
Right.
Just the system clearing out dead data?
That's a great question.
What makes this absence different?
I think it's different because it breaks an established, really intimate pattern of reciprocity. These aren't just, names on a list.
No.
These are people who showed up. They were reliable. They had this complex relational history within the game. They guarded your flanks. They shared secrets. You relied on them for certain tasks.
I see.
So the silence is noted because the role is now empty, and that social obligation is suddenly unfulfillable.
Ah, okay. So if we connect this back to that broader picture, that bamboo path between ancient needs and the global now it really shows us that the line between, digital existence and physical reality, it just dissolves.
Yeah.
It dissolves in these moments of profound emotional consequence. The functional digital identity, the one they saw every day, is suddenly gone, and the community isn't responding to the code.
No, they're responding to the life that animated that code.
Exactly. The human impulse to mourn is older than any technology we have.
And when that impulse meets this virtual space, it forces the space to adapt. It forces it to create a new kind of tradition.
So when that heavy silence finally settles, what happens next is what the analysis we're looking at calls the undesigned ceremony.
And this is the core idea, really.
It is. These were not prescripted rituals. They weren't built into the user interface. They were rituals that were discovered by the community.
Yes, the spaces were never built to hold grief. There's no instruction manual, no reward system for remembrance.
And that radical spontaneity, That's precisely why these acts feel so authentic, isn't it?
It is. If the developers had, coded a grief button or some kind of memorial zone, it would
I bet.
feel performative, exactly. It would feel structured by commerce or by design. But here, the players are just using the raw tools of their environment.
What do you mean by raw tools?
Movement, clothing, in-game objects, or even the lack of those things. And they're using them to satisfy this deep, inherent human need for structure when we're faced with chaos.
It really does speak volumes about our need for ritual, doesn't it? We need a structure to process the incomprehensible, and if one doesn't exist.
We invent it. We invent it out of whatever materials are at hand.
And in the digital world, those materials are things like light, color, and controlled movement.
And this really highlights how cultural practices, especially in these rapidly changing environments, are often a bottom-up phenomenon.
They're not coming from the top down.
Not at all. They emerge from a collective necessity, not from some centralized institutional design. The community finds a hole in the social map and just fills it.
And what emerges from that necessity is this spontaneous congregation. The sources really emphasize the complete absence of any official instruction, which I think makes that collective choice even more powerful, ethically speaking.
It does. What exists is something incredibly fragile, but also incredibly powerful. It's a shared decision to care.
That shared decision, that's the engine that interrupts the game's normal flow.
Absolutely. Think about the entire logic of a game for a second. It's built on utility, on objectives, on progression.
Right, getting to the next level.
Exactly. A spontaneous gathering for memory. It serves no utilitarian purpose. It advances no plot. It yields no experience points.
It's a pure act of human choice.
It is. And it's prioritized over the coded rules of the game itself.
Okay, let's get into the specifics of this because the details of these impromptu ceremonies are where the real meaning is. We have two really powerful case studies that show how these environmental assets get repurposed for emotional needs.
The first one is called a yellow gathering, and it's just such a vivid, almost heartbreaking example of collective aesthetic action.
It really is. Describe the scene for us. What happens?
Well, players just show up, and they all dress their characters in yellow.
All of them.
All of them. They're coordinating this, often across different time zones, different languages, purely based on one piece of shared information. Yellow was the favorite color of the person who is gone.
Wow. It's a temporary collective uniform.
It is. And think about how significant that is in a highly individualized space, like a game, where your avatar's appearance is a huge source of pride and identity, maybe even status.
So they're abandoning their own style.
They're temporarily abandoning their personalized style, their digital self-expression, to conform to a shared symbol of remembrance. They become this anonymous yellow crowd, just unified by a single grief.
And that collective experience, it deepens through the activities they do together. It's like a digital wake.
Exactly. They gather, they bring music, they share food, virtual feasts, obviously, and they tell stories about the player who's passed away.
They're mimicking a traditional wake, but doing it in a world made of pixels and polygons.
And the food isn't nourishing their bodies, of course, but the act of sharing it, dropping a rare item or some in-game delicacy on the ground where they stand, that's nourishing the community's bond.
And the music.
The music, it's likely shared through voice chat or maybe an in-game music system, and it just creates this auditory space of unified reflection.
The analysis points out that nothing permanent is physically built. There are no monuments, no statues.
Yeah.
And yet, for that moment, the world changes.
It's an act of temporary transformation, like creating a sacred overlay, a temporary shrine that only exists in the collective awareness of those who are present. And then, slowly, it dissipates.
The impermanence itself almost gives it more power.
I think so. It demands presence. If you weren't there for it, the memory is less potent. It's an event, not an object.
Okay, let's pivot to the second example. This one deals with repurposing geometry in motion itself. Case study 2. Light in the pause.
Right. And this takes place in a world that's often focused on navigation, conflict, resource gathering.
And in this environment, objects that are meant for conflict for navigation, they're suddenly used for mourning.
We see light appearing in an empty space. Maybe players are dropping lanterns or setting off flares, illuminating a place that was usually just dark or simply pass through.
That reversal of utility is so powerful. The tools of war, or of progress, a signaling flare that's meant to mark a target, or a shield meant to deflect damage, they become tools of peace.
Of reflection.
They stop marking territory and they start marking absence.
And the most dramatic illustration of this collective will is the cessation of movement.
Everything just stops.
Everything stops. Rivalries pause. Ships stop moving in mid-flight. Imagine a highly competitive, fast-paced universe where movement is survival, and suddenly everyone agrees to stop their engines, drop their weapons, and just...
But how difficult is that to enforce? I mean, in a game, if you stop moving, you often die or you lose. What happens to the players who refuse to pause? The ones who try to exploit that vulnerability?
That's the beautiful bit of social engineering that happens. The pressure of the collective decision is often enough to enforce compliance.
So it's social pressure.
It is. Anyone who violates that pause becomes instantly and visibly socially unacceptable. A pariah who chose progress over humanity. The community's decision to pause creates this temporary moral law that overrides the game's physical law.
For a while, the universe holds something other than progress. Memory. This shows a collective imposition of human values memory over mastery onto a system that was designed for acceleration and efficiency. The entire clock of the digital world just slows down to the pace of human grief.
It's truly remarkable, but as you said, not all digital grief is this grand public spectacle. The analysis also touches on what it calls the quiet recognition.
Right, highlighting that presence doesn't require deep familiarity.
And this is critical for understanding the sheer breadth of digital community. The quieter forms are just as meaningful.
Things like characters just kneeling or standing together in a corner.
Or fireworks lighting up a digital shoreline at night. Just a burst of beautiful, ephemeral light acknowledging an enduring absence.
And here we find this phenomenon of strangers attending.
Yes, the attendance of strangers. Many people present never actually met the person who was being mourned. Some never even spoke to them.
They might have just seen them in passing, been on the same server, or just read the news of their death. And yet they come. Why?
We often assume that grief has to be proportional to intimacy, don't we?
We do.
But the source gives us a much more expansive answer. They come because presence doesn't require familiarity, only recognition.
Recognition of what?
They recognize the shared humanity, their shared space, the fundamental right to be acknowledged within that community fabric. Their attendance is a quiet, powerful vote confirming that this digital space matters and that the loss is real.
So even if their relationship was purely tangential, they were just, two ships passing in the digital night, their presence affirms a sense of belonging.
Not just for the person who died, but for everyone still standing there. It assures them that they too would be missed.
Right.
And now we have to shift from that to the profound sociological impact of these rituals, moving out of the digital world and back into the physical one where the family is grappling with the loss.
This is where the sources highlight this massive, really painful disconnect between the external perception of their child's life and the internal reality.
Especially for the family of the deceased.
This section is maybe what gives the most context to the digital life that was lost. It's called the misunderstood life. From the outside, the perception of being immersed in a digital world is often, it's deeply negative.
Oh, absolutely. We live in a society that really fetishizes physical presence. So parents, they often see gaming as isolation, withdrawal, escape.
And they believe their child was alone.
Disconnected from real life. They see the hours spent, and they translate that into hours lost from meaningful interaction.
And that perception is understandable, isn't it? When you don't speak the language of that community. When a child is spending hours interacting with these unseen voices through a headset, all the observer sees is the physical separation. A person alone in a room. It registers as an absence from life because the activity leaves no visible, tangible trace in the living room.
And then comes the sudden, profound moment. The source calls it the funeral revelation.
The actual physical funeral.
Yes. The funeral room starts to fill up. Sometimes it's overflowing with people the family has never seen before, never even heard mentioned. Friends from servers, guildmates, teammates.
These are people the parents may have never known even existed, and yet they arrive.
Yeah.
And they're carrying genuine grief.
The sheer quantity and the quality of that grief, it acts as a physical validation of the unseen life their child was living.
And we have to consider the logistics of this pilgrimage.
It's incredible. These digital friends, they travel for hours. They cross borders, often at great personal expense, and with very little certainty about how they'll even be received.
And they stand there quietly, unsure of their physical place, but carrying a loss that is deep and immediate. Their physical effort is what bridges that perceived gap between the virtual and the material.
And that moment, it forces the family into this painful but necessary process of defining digital belonging. The realization starts to dawn on the parents.
Their child had not been isolated.
No, he had been connected. Deeply.
That realization must be a cognitive earthquake for them.
Completely. The late nights, the long sessions, the voices through a headset. They realize were not absence from life, they were participation in it.
It reframes the entire activity. It's not escapism anymore.
It becomes this complex social endeavor built on belonging, on friendship, mutual responsibility, and genuine, sustained care.
It redefines the very word participation. If participation means investing emotional energy and building reciprocal relationships, then the hours they spent playing were, in fact, participation in a real functioning social system.
The emotional investment was real.
Therefore, the loss is real.
And this helps us connect the dots, right? The medium changes, it's fiber optics instead of face-to-face, but the core human experience of community, of shared investment, that remains constant.
So why are these connections so profoundly invisible to outsiders? This brings us to the reality of the invisible community. Why is there such a default assumption of isolation?
Well, they're invisible precisely because they are asynchronous and non-physical. They leave no traces in the living room, no school photos, no trophies on a shelf.
The usual metrics of a real-life connection, the tangible artifacts, the visible attendance at social events, they're all missing.
Which allows that societal assumption of isolation to just persist unchallenged.
And I imagine the language used by the community itself, all the jargon, abbreviations, in-jokes, that must act as another barrier for parents trying to understand.
Of course. The parents hear noise, not conversation. They see a distraction, not a world.
Yet the crucial insight that the sources confirm is that even if they are unseen, these communities are real enough to show up when it matters most.
They don't just send condolences in a digital chat window. They show up physically. At the funeral home.
And the source clarifies what this mourning is not. When communities mourn like this, they are not compensating for a lack of real connection.
No.
They are continuing relationships that already existed, relationships that simply lived in a different space.
And that is the essential takeaway for anyone trying to understand modern connectivity. The geography might be virtual, the avatars might be fantastic, but the underlying relationship is materially real in its emotional consequence and its capacity to sustain a community.
It reminds me of the ancient idea that the path is just the structure, and the significance is in the journey and the companions you have. Whether that path is made of stone in the mountains or fiber optics under the ocean, the fundamental human need for connection and shared responsibility, it persists.
And it's validated by the willingness of people to travel across continents, to stand in silence for a friend they only ever knew as an avatar.
Okay, so moving from these public, spontaneous rituals, we now need to look at the full spectrum of remembrance. This includes the more hidden, more nuanced forms of honoring memory.
Right. The act of resisting this kind of digital erasure is multifaceted. It requires this ongoing commitment.
Let's start with what the sources call the quiet legacy, this profound idea of a player's profile transforming from a tool into a trace.
This is the invisible practice of families just quietly leaving accounts untouched.
Which holds enormous emotional weight, and it operates completely against the core nature of the system.
It does. Achievements freeze. Playtime stops. The digital identity is deliberately preserved in a state of stasis, often by the family deciding to just keep paying for a subscription even if no one is logging in.
So in a digital world that's designed for perpetual motion, for updates, new content, consumption, continuous progress, this stillness is an act of defiance.
It's a resistance to the system's utility function, and it's a deep, quiet expression of respect. The account transitions from an active participant to a monument.
The source calls this care practiced carefully, often invisibly.
It's an acknowledgement that even though the person is gone, the record of their presence, their achievements, it shouldn't be erased, it shouldn't be repurposed for the next user. The profile becomes a quiet monument, a relic of a life lived.
And this defiance is practical too. I mean, if you think about technical entropy, in a lot of these systems, if an account isn't logged into for 6 months or a year,
it risks deletion, or the username gets recycled.
Exactly. So the family's choice to keep it active, even if it's dormant, is an active fight against the ephemeral nature of the digital world.
It creates this really poignant space. If you go to that person's profile, everything is just frozen in time. Their last message, their last recorded victory, the gear they chose, it's all there.
A perfectly preserved snapshot.
A snapshot of their final active moment, visible to the whole community, even though they can't interact with it anymore.
This resistance to speed and utility, it's seen even in the most unlikely of places. These hyper-competitive, fast-paced environments. We need to look at the slowing down of competition.
It's so counterintuitive. Competitive games like first-person shooters or strategy games, they are fundamentally built on speed, on stats, on reaction time, on victory.
They are, by their very design, the antithesis of reflection.
Reflection costs you time, it costs you the match, and yet memory finds a way in. Through tributes.
Specifically through community-made videos.
Yes. These quiet, respectful tributes. Carefully edited moments of gameplay that showcase the departed player's skill, or maybe just their personality.
The power of these videos lies entirely in how they reverse the game's core logic. The sources say they slow everything down in these competitive spaces.
They do. They take a rapid sequence of events, a split-second shot, a crucial tactical move, and they force the viewer to pause, to look at the geometry of the moment, rather than just the simple outcome of winning or losing.
And the focus shifts completely, doesn't it? From technical mastery to human character.
It does. A player is remembered not for their win-loss ratio, not for their stats, but for pauses, angles held just a second longer, the rhythm of patience.
The details that make a player unique, their style, their strategic choices, those are the things that get magnified.
It's the moment of the headshot, but slowed right down. And it's not to celebrate the kill, it's to celebrate the skill and the presence of the person who executed it. The game, which is designed for immediate urgency, is momentarily hijacked by reflection.
It's focusing on the past, not the impending future victory.
And what remains is this beautiful paradox. What is remembered is not mastery, it's presence.
It's the idiosyncratic way they moved, the specific choices they made, the unique rhythm they brought to that shared space. Their ghost exists in the style they left behind.
Which brings us to the synthesis of all this, the choice to carry memory. The overarching pattern we see across all these examples, from the yellow gathering to the frozen profile to the slow motion video, is the active, intentional nature of remembrance.
The sources are absolutely clear on this. Memory is not enforced, it is chosen.
There's no obligation. There's only a decision made by the community to hold that space open, to spend their time and their resources on an act that yields zero personal advancement.
This is where we see the community fulfilling a vital social role when the formal systems fail.
Absolutely. Games were never meant to be memorial spaces, but people demanded it. Where institutions don't know how to hold grief, communities often step in.
The institutions provide the utilitarian structure.
And the community provides the moral structure.
And they honor without instruction. They mourn without certainty. And that uncertainty is fundamental, isn't it?
It is. They don't know the proper protocol. They don't know if their actions will last 5 minutes or 5 years. But they proceed anyway.
Why?
Because the human imperative to remember is stronger than the lack of an institutional framework.
That's the essence of emerging culture, isn't it? Culture adapts to human needs far faster than formalized institutions ever could.
The community finds the path where the map has no coordinates. It proves that the human capacity for compassion is not limited by the architecture of the technology it uses.
I think we need to linger on that concept of uncertainty for a moment longer. The fact that they're mourning without certainty, without a guarantee that their act will be preserved or even recognized by the platform, it shows a dedication that's beyond transactional.
Yes, it's a gift.
A gift given solely for the sake of the memory itself, not for validation or preservation.
Which makes the act purer, I think. In a world that's obsessed with logging everything, with guaranteeing persistence, these acts are consciously ephemeral. A public gathering might last an hour. A video might get taken down.
But the communal act of choosing to participate in that temporary, fragile moment.
That's what embeds the memory into the community's collective history.
So we've examined all these acts of remembrance. Now let's reflect on their durability and their meaning. Our sources invite us to consider the meaning of impermanence. In these worlds designed for constant flux, for change, for iteration, what constitutes meaningful remembrance?
The lesson these temporary rituals teach us is, I think, deeply counterintuitive to our digital age. And it's this: not everything needs to last forever to matter.
We're so used to equating permanence, digital storage, backups, institutional records with significance.
We are. But digital grief shows us that a momentary, heartfelt act can hold immense, lasting value.
And the examples serve as compelling evidence of that principle. Sometimes just wearing a color for an evening is enough.
The impact is immediate, it's shared, it's deep, even if the clothing changes the next day.
Sometimes a burst of light in a digital sky is enough. Sometimes just showing up and standing in silence is sufficient.
And these ephemeral acts are enough because they demonstrate the collective, conscious willingness to acknowledge the loss, to interrupt the system's relentless drive forward. The significance is found in the effort, not in the duration.
This brings us back to the essential message of the pause. In worlds designed for movement, for production, for progress, these intentional pauses, the ship stopping, the competitive play halting,
they declare a human priority.
They say definitively that presence doesn't end when a login does.
The digital identity persists. It lives on in the memory of the community. Even when the person is gone, the collective experience they contributed, the shared history, the inside jokes, the victories, the failures, that experience remains a part of the community's identity.
The input source is gone,
but the echo resonates.
And this is why, fundamentally, digital remembrance isn't a lesser act than traditional physical mourning. It's simply a human one.
It's a human one that's adapting to the new topography of our existence. Our ancient inclination to mark a loss is just finding a new medium, a new space to perform its vital function.
What remembrance truly asks of us, regardless of the space, is, well, it's minimal in material terms, but enormous emotionally. The sources distill it perfectly. Not permanence, not guarantees, not even visibility.
Just the willingness to pause, to notice that someone was here.
That willingness to pause, it affirms the persistence of a shared experience. That something shared does not vanish simply because it no longer moves.
The memories are archived, not in servers, but in the reciprocal relationship history between the players who remain. And that history is real and powerful.
Finally, we have to look at the nature of this persistent action as an act of resisting erasure.
Because digital memory is inherently fragile. The digital world has a bias toward forgetting anything that's inactive or non-utilitarian.
So memory, in this space, it exists only as long as someone chooses to carry it forward.
And that continuing action is the community's active resistance against this digital entropy. People return, they wear the color, they light the sky, they hold a space open for a moment longer than necessary.
They're overriding the system's tendency toward utility and efficiency with human compassion, with will.
And in that choice, in that shared, unnecessary effort, there is a silent, profound power. In choosing to pause, to remember, to interrupt the flow of the game, something quietly resists erasure.
This collective will is what elevates the digital space from just a transactional environment
to a space of sacred human meaning.
This entire exploration, it reveals that the deepest lesson these worlds teach us is, surprisingly, a very traditional one.
Which is?
That community, even when it's unseen, inherently possesses the knowledge of how to remember. It doesn't need instructions, it just needs the impetus of loss.
It demonstrates that the architecture of a space, whether it's physical or virtual, it can't dictate human emotion or moral obligation. Grief and remembrance will always find a way to express themselves.
Utilizing whatever tools are at hand.
Even repurposing objects of conflict into ceremonial lights.
This all leads to one final provocative thought for you, our listener, to carry forward with you. The source material suggests that remembering is just the willingness to pause. So if these digital spaces, which are designed for endless movement, for consumption, for urgency, if they can successfully integrate the pause of grief, like the yellow gathering or the stopped ships, what does that imply about the necessary role of pause and reflection in our own physical, non-digital lives?
And how much, in a relentless pursuit of progress and productivity, are we resisting that essential human need to simply stop, to notice, and to remember that someone was here? It's a question that applies as much to the path to the mountain temple as it does to the path through a gaming server. The connection and the pause is always there, just waiting for our choice.